There's a wheel in a wheel, way up in the middle of the air, and I bet that's what you remember about Ezekiel. Well, we're going to look at Ezekiel in this lesson, and there's a verse, Ezekiel 36:26, that I think most people, if you don't have it memorized, you're at least familiar with it. In that verse, God said, I will put in you a new heart, and I will give you a new spirit. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I think a lot of you probably have the same story I do. I had a hard heart, very hard. And God removed it and put in me a heart that cares. I made a joke one time that my father had never been a rebellious young man. And he said, yes, I was. And one of my uncles, his brothers, said, yeah, it was one summer day in 1962 or something like that. I don't remember what year he said. No, it had to be before 62 because by then he was married. Anyway, the prophet Ezekiel. What do you know about him? We'll get to another song near the end. But do you even know where the wheel in the wheel passage is? Ezekiel wrote about wheels in chapters 1, 3, 10, and 11. However, the verse that inspired the song that everyone only remembers one line from is in chapter 1. But instead of reading just that verse, let's take a look at Ezekiel 1, and we're going to get a sample of Ezekiel's writing style. He was a dynamic author. I'd have loved to read his children's storybook because, he could have written science fiction. He could have written a good old story about some ancient war. I don't care. I love his writing. I'm going to start in verse 4, and I'm going to go almost to the end of chapter 1. Ezekiel wrote this, I saw a whirlwind come out of the north like a great cloud with lightning flashing brilliantly. The center of the cloud glowed like melting metal. In the middle of all of that was something looking like 4 living creatures. They looked like men. However, all 4 of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and their feet were like a calf's foot that sparkled like polished brass. They had human hands under their wings that were on their 4 sides. Their wings touched each other's wings, and they did not turn to the side, but went straight forward altogether. Their faces were human faces on one side, a lion's face on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, and the face of an eagle as well. They each had 2 wings stretched up, and with those 2 wings of each joined to another creature, and 2 of their wings covered their bodies, and they did not turn to the side, but went straight forward altogether wherever the Spirit went. They appeared like burning coals or torches. Fire moved around in between the 4 creatures. The fire was very bright, and lightning came out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the 4 creatures, I saw 4 wheels on the ground, one next to each creature with 4 faces. The wheels sparkled like topaz, and they were identical to each other. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting another wheel. As the wheels moved, they would go in whatever direction the creatures faced, and the wheels did not change direction when the creatures changed direction. The wheels' rims were tall and awesome, and all 4 rims had eyes all the way around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels next to them moved. When the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose as well. Wherever the Spirit went, they would go, and the wheels would go with them. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures stopped, the wheels also stopped. When the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Oh, wow. Verse 16 contains the phrase wheel intersecting another wheel in my paraphrase here. Or in the King James Bible, if you'd like, you will find the phrase wheel in the middle of a wheel. There is no line in Ezekiel that says wheel in a wheel way up in the middle of the air. The author of that song took some liberties. But I don't see anything wrong with what he wrote. Or she wrote. Whoever wrote it. I didn't look that up, sorry. So Ezekiel has often been called the watchman. First time, orange cream swirl protein drink. Years ago, my doctor said I didn't get enough protein, so I was supposed to drink some. Orange cream swirl, kind of cool. I hadn't tasted it before. Sorry, back to our regularly scheduled nonsense. So Ezekiel's been often called a watchman because when God called him to ministry, God called him a watchman for the people of Israel. God told him he would have to speak out to warn Israel that if he warned people and they didn't stop their evil practices, God would not hold him accountable, but that if he did not warn them, God would hold him accountable. You can read about that in Ezekiel 3. And when Ezekiel shared his calling with the people of Israel in Ezekiel 33, he made it clear that if the watchman standing on the towers, for instance, or the walls doesn't warn the people of an impending attack, that God's going to hold him accountable for their souls. But if he warns them and they ignore him, then God doesn't hold them accountable. I paraphrase. And, no doubt when James, the Apostle James, the brother of Jesus, wrote his epistle, I think he was thinking about Ezekiel's calling when he wrote in James 3 that leaders would be held to a higher standard. This is something that appears throughout the Bible. If you are a leader of God's people, Sunday school teacher, pastor, whatever, elder, deacon, be aware. God holds you to a higher standard. Speak the truth. Don't mollycoddle. Don't water it down. Speak the truth, but with love. In his book, Ezekiel used some very descriptive language, which I've already talked about, to share his visions, and he had more than one, and he was not afraid to make a show in front of the people on the streets of Jerusalem. What do I mean by show? Well, I'm glad you asked. For example, God instructed Ezekiel to draw the outline of Jerusalem on a block of clay, and then lay siege to it with a ramp and battering rams. How big was this block of clay? Then he was to take an iron pan and place it between himself and the city, and he was to lay on his left side for 390 days to symbolize the number of years Israel had rejected God. 390 years. And Ezekiel had to lay on his left side on the ground for 390 days. After those days, he was to roll over and lay on his right side for 40 days to symbolize the number of years Judah had rejected God. How would you like to have that command? What do you think somebody would think if you went downtown here and said, well, I'm going to lay on the sidewalk for 390 days and I'm going to get up and lay down my right side for 40 more? Here would come the men with the little white coats with straps. And, they're coming to take me away. Hey. So, but it gets worse. During the 390 days he was on his left side, he was to bake his bread and other food in front of the people, and it was to be baked over human waste. That's what God said. That was to symbolize what the people would eat when they were under siege and when they were prisoners. Ezekiel objected to using human waste, so God allowed him to use cow waste. You can read that story in Ezekiel 4. Oh my goodness. In Ezekiel 5, on a different occasion, God told him to shave his head, which was contrary to Jewish law, Leviticus 17. After shaving his head, he divided his hair into piles in order to tell people of the coming destruction of Jerusalem. Now, he divided it into 3 piles. And when the siege of Jerusalem began, Ezekiel was to burn 1/3, 1 pile of his hair inside of Jerusalem. He was then to spread 1/3 of his hair around the city and scatter 1/3 of his hair to the wind. Although God told him to take a few hairs and throw them into a fire, just a few. That was when the siege began. What do you think it meant? 1/3 of the hair burned in the city. Destruction of Jerusalem, maybe? 1/3 spread around the city, maybe representing the army or the people of the countryside. And 1/3 scattered on the wind, meaning God's people were going to go everywhere. I don't have it in my notes. You read Ezekiel 5, see what you think. All right. Perhaps almost as well known as The Wheel in a Wheel is another song about dem bones, dem dry bones, and bones, and bones, and dry bones. Well, in chapter 37, Ezekiel shared a vision of a valley full of scattered human bones, and when God commanded, they all came together and were covered with flesh and were given the breath of life. This symbolized the restoration of the people of Israel in respect to their relationship with God. In the first 24 chapters of his book, he warned about the coming destruction of Jerusalem and then concluded his book by promising Jerusalem would eventually be restored. So 24 chapters. And then there's a bit of a break. And Ezekiel, in that last part, gave a vivid, detailed description of his vision regarding the restoration of Jerusalem. Vision included a river of life flowing out of Jerusalem, which symbolized God's presence with his people. Ezekiel 37, read it. I'm not going to go into that. I'm trying to get you a picture of Ezekiel. Now, one more thing I want to say before I leave Ezekiel. In chapter 14, God told Ezekiel that if a country sins against him, even Noah, Daniel, and Job could save no one except themselves. Wow, Noah, Daniel, and Job. Whew. And by the way, Ezekiel and Daniel, pretty much the same time. I mean, their lives crossed over. In chapter 28, chapter 14 was in the first 24 chapters, obviously. Break. In chapter 28, God told Ezekiel to confront the king of Tyre, and included in that challenge was a question asking the king if he was wiser than Daniel. So by the time Ezekiel wrote chapter 28, he was in Babylon as one of the exiles. So Daniel's wisdom would have been well known because Daniel was in Babylon at that time. Kind of cool. Ezekiel talking about Daniel. God's prophets understood God's prophets. And they read the scriptures, as we've seen throughout all of our Bible studies. Many, many quotes from one author to another, whether Old Testament to New Testament or Old Testament to Old Testament. Yeah. All right. Well, God bless you. I hope you take time to read Ezekiel. I wanted to write about this one, but no, we didn't. We just looked at Ezekiel, the man, and kind of what he did. Trying to finish the Old Testament people of significance, and I got just a few more. God bless, and I love you.